Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to the introductory lecture for uh, user-centered interaction design. I'm recording this on January 22nd, Sunday. So we're just about to start the course tomorrow. And this is the first time this particular course is being taught, and it eventually will have another course number where we have an application in for that. It'll be InfoST 581. But right now it's in a special topics category. So for this semester, it's InfoST 691. There are two sections of it, one for grads and one for undergrads, and they're section 206 and 207. I'm not sure which order that's in, but I like to think of this as one big happy family. What we're looking at right now is a copy of the weekly schedule, and this is a little application I put together that allows me to keep information about, well, it's a content management application for the course, right? So it's primarily organized by week. So there are, I think, 17 weeks in the semester, of which we only use 16. The last one is studying exams and graduation. And there is, associated with each course, there's an index page. So as you can see here, there are 17 weeks. And although the occasional user will tell me that this page has usability problems, because of the affordances that we have for the link over here. So to get to the week that you want, you hover over the week number and it changes its appearance. And that's how you know it's clickable. And some of my students had thought that perhaps that was a little bit weak in terms of being able to figure out that that's a link. And I'm sure we'll talk about that before the semester is over. So what you were seeing is what happens when you click on week one. Okay. And for right now, what is up as of this very minute is week one is up. There's a schedule for week one. You can go from week to week by clicking on next, okay? But most of the remainder of the weeks are not up, but they'll be up very soon. They'll be up in the next couple days. As we go through the syllabus, you'll see that the schedule is pretty well laid out in the syllabus. And of course, we did that when we designed the course. And but the official version is going to be the version that comes to live in this weekly schedule application. And I'm going to finish populating it in the next day or two. Okay, now just as long as we're here and we're talking about the schedule, there are a couple of special weeks. There's week 17, I mentioned before, we don't really use. So we don't have any activities on week 17 at all. The hand-in activities for the course will be at the very end of week 16. Okay? And week 9 is a popular week. That's spring break or spring recess, as we officially call it here at UWM. So we won't be doing anything that week. Okay? So, and again, the key week for final work hand-in will probably be week 16. Okay? And when we're going through the syllabus, you'll see that there. Okay? So let's go back to week 1 and look at the schedule for this week. You'll see that I have online office hours sessions every Monday evening. So Monday evenings from 6:30 to 7:30. I'm online on GoToMeeting. I'd like to invite you to come. It's certainly an optional session. Um, um, I find a course where I record lectures and tutorials, and you consume them. And the only real feedback that I get from you is in sort of emails and forums. Um, I find that as less than a completely satisfying experience for me. That's the way they designed our courses, and that's the way um, that's the way they're going to stay for probably forever. But these online office hours, I've called them a couple things. I've called them discussion sessions. I've called them drop-in sessions. I'm now calling them online office hours. Um, this is a place to come by to talk about what's going on in the course, um, and check in and interact with me, interact with each other, get to know people. So I hope you'll come by. If not every week, I'll hope you come by some weeks. There's a link here at the end of that paragraph on online office hours that says this link. That should take you to GoToMeeting. I would ask you to get a headset or to use a headset because the experience is really the best if you're using a headset. Otherwise, we get feedback and things like that. So, uh, I have taken in the last couple of semesters, if students who were not able to make an online office hours session have said to me, could you record them? And I thought that was a good idea, and I tried doing it last summer, and it was a big success. And I did it in the fall, and that was successful as well. So I guess that's a standard feature now. And typically, what happens is that I post the recording link. I put these things up on YouTube, like I put up lectures and tutorials, and I typically post that the next morning. Okay? So if we have an online office hours session on Monday the 23rd in the evening, typically the recording of it will get up sometime on Tuesday, January 24th. Apart from that, the major feature of the weekly schedules that we have is that we have a whole lot of stuff that's due over the course of a week. And in my course, as in, I think most instructors, if not all, do this at UWM, the week starts on Monday, okay? And the week ends at the very end of the day on Sunday. Okay, so you see that there's a weekly assignments deadline at 11:55 p.m. on Sunday. So you have all week to view recordings, do your readings, work on your work, all that kind of stuff. And that gives you a lot of time to put towards it on the weekend, which I know for a lot of you is a consideration. And so please get your work up there by 11:55 p.m. on Sunday. In a typical week, here in the weekly schedule, I list out the topics that we're going to cover during the week. Here, you'll see I've got some kind of introductory topics, plus the first two chapters from our textbook. I have the syllabus as one of the readings. I have chapters 1 and 2 from our textbook. I call our textbook ID 4E, and that's instead of using the names of the three authors, which I sometimes do, I just wanted to call this Interaction Design 4th Edition. So that's how I thought up ID4E. And that's the book by Priest, Rogers, and Sharp. And I have that right here with me here. There are two papers to read for the week. There's the Shackle paper and the Gruden paper. I've retrieved those and put them out there for you to be able to get with just a click. And I'm hoping to do that for all the papers. So that's a part of what it takes me to set up the schedule is retrieving these PDFs to make things a little bit easier on you. Required recordings, these are videos typically that I want you to watch. They'll be videos like this. You typically don't see my face, you see my screen, and you hear me talking. So here we've got 3. The first one is the one that you're listening to, Introduction and Syllabus Review. And then I'm going to be recording a lecture for Chapter 1 from ID4E and Chapter 2. I'll have those up by Monday morning. Okay. This I'm going to have up on Sunday night. I'll have this one up a little bit early. So I typically I'm going to have to record all the videos for this course. So if I don't have the videos, the thing for you to go to, I'm going to indicate the day it's going to come available. And all these are set for tomorrow, Monday the 23rd, the first day. The last of the second section's class participation assignments due. I've got this in online courses refers to forum posts primarily, and here exclusively. And there's one required post that I want you to make, which is introducing yourself. Okay. And then the other one is kind of optional in some sense. During the semester, I'm going to want you to do 3 posts on one of the readings for that week. And by posts, I mean, significant posts, 300 to 400 words. They go in the article discussion forum. I want you to summarize the findings of the paper and to discuss the implications of the findings for you, the interaction design practitioner, which may not be the way that you think of yourself, but I'm hoping that's how you're going to think of yourself when we're done with the course. Okay, so you don't have to do one of those every week. Perhaps no one will do one the first week, we'll see. But you need to do 3. Okay, and you need to talk about just one of the papers for that week. This week we've got 2. Other weeks we typically have about 2, but we might have 1 or we might have 3. So that's how to use the schedule, and I'm hoping that works well for you. So typically when I change things on the schedule, what's going to change on the schedule here is I'm going to add more content to it. Typically when I do that, I post a message in the news on the D2L, and then I send a copy of that to the students in the class with an email through D2L. Okay, so if you watch your email, you should see whenever new content is popping up. So for instance, if I say that I'm going to post a lecture video on a particular date, and do you have to go and look at the site over and over again to see if it's up? No, just watch your email, because when I finally post it to the site, I'll put it up on news, and I'll send you a copy of that in the email, and for me, I get my email on my smartphone, so you can keep your eye on the availability of content just by being able to do something like that. Okay, so that's the schedule. Oh, and that's how do I get to that? There's typically a link. If I say that the content's up for week 4, I typically give you the URL to get you to week 4. There is a link to get you to the index page in the content tab of our D2L page. Okay, and I would recommend that instead of having to log into D2L to get that, that you find this URL, which you can kind of see up here right now, that you bookmark that, because that's going to be persistent. Okay? Great. So let's talk about the syllabus in the course. Let's give this schedule a shrink and bring up the syllabus. Okay. So again, the course that you registered for was probably officially called Special Topics in Information Studies or something like that, 691. That's a category that we use for courses that we haven't secured an official course number for. And this one is on its way to being 581 instead of 691. But it's called User-Centered Interaction Design. And it's about interaction design from from a general perspective, from a multi-disciplined perspective, but with a strong eye toward what the information science profession has to bring to these usability concerns, right? So we're going to pay special attention to our information science heritage as an iSchool and give you the benefit of that, because this is one of the major places where people think about, talk about, research about usability. Okay, so let's look about this. Course description: introduce human-computer interaction theories and design processes. The emphasis is on an applied user experience design. And the next paragraph, the general description: an introductory course in human-computer interaction, an integrated field of practice that is informed by many areas including interaction design, human factors, usability, and user experience. So this particular practice area has a lot of different theory and practice contributors, a couple of which come from the information science side, but we're really taking a well-rounded view. So we're not only going to talk with people, we're not only going to talk about what people from the information science have said, but really more generally what people in the field more generally have said and believe and recommend. Course builds a theoretical foundation for interaction design, including understanding and conceptualizing interaction, cognitive aspects, social interaction, emotional interaction, the nature of interfaces. Practical skills addressed included data gathering, data analysis, establishing requirements, prototyping, and evaluation. If you're in the course, you've either met the prereq or you've found some way to get us to say you could take the course. So good for you. What are the objectives? Well, after completing this course, you should be able to articulate the theory and design practices that contribute to interaction design, articulate the cognitive, social, and emotional foundations of interaction design, assess a website's accessibility based upon well-established guidelines for accessibility, demonstrate the ability to build prototypes at varying levels of fidelity, from paper prototypes to functional interactive prototypes, analyze and assess user interfaces by applying various usability criteria, and demonstrate the ability to conduct a full life cycle design project, including identifying requirements, prototyping, and testing. And that, of course, would be the final project. We have a section for ALA competencies. Because this is a course that we offer in the MLIS program, it's important for us to demonstrate how the course relates to the ALA competencies, and I'll leave those for you to read. Time expectations. This is a pretty intense course. It's a 3-credit course. We've estimated a time commitment of 144 hours. We're going to be talking about 9 to 10 hours a week. And the fact is that it's going to take you either less time or more time, depending upon how fast you are at these things and how much you've done them before, or how much they're brand new. Okay, so your experience is going to vary, but I think this is a good kind of a general estimate. Our textbook, which again I've been calling ID4E, is Interaction Design Beyond Human-Computer Interaction, 4th edition by Rogers, Sharp, and Priest. And this has been a very popular and influential book, and one that I like a lot. I mean, I've used a couple of different books, and this is the one I like the best right now. And this is, I think, very well suited to the kind of course that we're going to be doing. We have a list of the readings here. And I believe these are articles. Okay, so we've got week 1, as you saw before, we're reading Shackle and Gruden. And then we go on. Now, I've got to say, one of the other things that I teach is systems analysis. So I'm very interested in I'm very interested in information organization and system design. And one of the problems I have with the classic syllabus is that it states facts redundantly. Okay? So here we have a list of articles, and then we're going to have a schedule in which we're going to list articles again, and then we're going to put the articles into context, of what week they're going to go into. The problem I have is, as soon as you have duplicate information in an information system, you begin to run the risk that the 2 or more versions won't agree with each other. And as soon as you get them out of sync with each other, people lose their confidence in the information that you have, because they never know which of the versions is the right version. And so one of the major parts of of data modeling and database design is to, in these kinds of systems, to eliminate redundant information. So instead of thinking of all these various expressions of the requirements here of what you have to read, instead of thinking them as things that you need to read and kind of proof against each other, one of the reasons I have for my weekly schedule is just that. I want you to be able to go to one place. And oh wow, that was not what I expected at all. I don't know what I've done here. Nope. I have really created a mess. Okay. All right. We're going to shrink that back in. Wow. That was exciting. I bet that looked a little weird on the screen. Okay. So what I wanted to do was just to come back here and say that, the readings here in the weekly schedule are listed one time. Okay. Whereas in the classic UWM syllabus, they are redundant, and they can get out of sync. Okay, so I'm really going to want you to come to relying on the weekly schedule. I hope I made that point. All right, let's go on. So we have a list of the articles here, and these articles do a really good job of telling you or showing you what researchers in the field have been discovering for us, right? So when we expand the knowledge base of the field, it comes out in these kinds of scholarly articles. And so what we have is we have a series of scholarly articles that are picked because they relate to the topics of the particular week in which we're going to be reading and discussing them. All right. So I'm not going to go through all the papers specifically here, but we have a paper or two or sometimes three in each of the weeks. Okay. Software. This is where we discuss software in a UWM syllabus. In the short one, we're not going to be using software. We're going to be learning about these usability and interaction design theories and principles. But eventually, we're going to be using software for a number of things, okay? Things I've talked about already. We're going to do a usability study, okay? So, for instance, it's typical to take users and to record their interaction with our application, okay? And then to use that to gather data about the usability of the system. So there's lots of different kinds of software that you can use for this. The software that I would probably use would be Camtasia because I have a license to it. That's what I'm using right here. We do have some other options as well. So you're going to need to pick some software to do that with. We are going to create low fidelity prototypes of applications, and by applications we're typically talking about web applications here. Okay, so there are certainly you can do that by hand. Okay, and there are special software products that will help you create low fidelity prototypes. High fidelity prototypes. There's certainly software that will allow you to do that. If you're a programmer, you could create a high fidelity prototype with the same kind of tools that you would use to build the final product. So the approach that we're taking in this course is that we're going to specify the requirements for the work that you're going to do. We're going to want you to check with us to make sure that the tool that you intend to use is appropriate. We're going to give a fair amount of latitude in the actual tools that you use. One of the things I'd like to come out of that is if it turns out that somebody has a license to one of the more expensive pieces of software like Camtasia, well, why use something that's more of a compromise if you already have that? Okay, so I'm going to allow some differences from person to person. And we'll be working our way through that. That'll be a lot of the kind of stuff that comes up during online office hours. I would expect a lot of back and forth on potential products that people are interested in using for the various things that we're going to do. Instructional methods, lecture, which is this, discussion. Typically in an online course, a discussion is in these discussion forums, and we will have discussion forums. Our primary discussion forums, there's one to introduce yourself. There's going to be one for the weekly, for the discussion of the articles that we read on a weekly basis. Probably have a third one. But a little different than your typical online course. These online office hours are a real discussion opportunity. It's an opportunity to have a discussion and get the things that you normally get the benefits. And I do keep track of who's there and who it contributes. So in the same sense that I give students participation credit for their participation in online forums, I give them credit for participation in online office hours. Now, I do realize that not everyone can come, and that's and certainly it's challenging for even a particular person to come every week, although some people have. But that's one of the reasons that we record the sessions and I publish them. And demonstrations for the most part will be tutorials. Okay, so in addition to lecture videos, I'll be creating some tutorial videos. Because we're going to have some latitude with tools, I'll probably demonstrate a particular skill with just one tool. So there won't be one for every possible tool that you can use, but you'll have some idea about how I think you ought to go about this kind of activity. Okay, the first thing I say about the schedule is essentially this is not the official schedule. Okay. Again, as a systems analyst, I find that putting schedules into syllabus is a pretty bad design idea because schedules are to some extent fluid. I mean, they are going to change a bit over the course of the semester. We're going to discover that there's an error in it, or we're going to discover that we didn't cover as much as we thought, or we're going to change something. Well, if we do, well, that syllabus is out there and it's pretty static. So instead of that, I have this weekly schedule application, which is the official schedule, and you can click through and get to that same place where I had you before. Okay, so that's the URL that will get you there. All right. Okay, so although since that's not completely populated, let's go through this to get an idea about what we're doing in certain weeks. Okay, so week 1 we are getting started. So the breakdown that we've got the topics, we've got the readings, we've got the assignments due. You can assume that associated with the topics, there'll be lecture recordings, and associated with some of the assignments due, there'll probably be some tutorials. Okay, and they're not listed here, but they'll be in the weekly schedule. We're covering the first 2 chapters of the textbook in week 1, and we're reading 2 articles. In week 2, we're doing chapters 3 and 4, cognitive aspects and social interaction, and we're reading 3 articles. In week 3, we're covering emotional interaction and interfaces. Those are chapters 5 and 6, and we're covering 2 articles. Okay, and we have an assignment that's going to be due there that we call identification of best and worst interfaces, and there's a little bit more information on that a little bit later in the syllabus. Week 4, understanding user needs, data gathering. That's at chapter 7. So this is where we start to distinguish this course from less, I would say, scientific approaches to this subject. Okay, there's some people who think about usability in terms of best practices, right? So you can find a lot of books about best practices for building highly usable web applications. And the fact is that we are going to talk about some of those tips and tricks in our course, but we're taking a really empirical approach to usability. Okay, so we're going to say to be able to understand the level of usability for a particular application, you need to be able to gather data on it. You need to be able to measure it before you're able to manage it. So chapter 7 is where we jump in and start to build the skills for our empirical approach to our scientific approach to usability, user experience, and interaction design. The next week, week 5, we're going to be getting into data analysis. So we're covering chapter 8 from the textbook. And then there's another assignment due. There's a web accessibility assessment. So here's our opportunity to practice this data gathering and data analysis. Week 6, the process of interaction design. That's chapter 9 from the textbook. We've got 2 articles that we're going to read. Chapter 7, establishing requirements. That's chapter 10 from the textbook. And you're going to be doing a final project, and so one of the deliverables along the way is a proposal for it to make sure that we're on the same page, and that's going to be due in week 7. Okay. Week 8, design, prototyping, and construction. Those are going to be covered in chapter 11, and I think we've got 2 articles for you. And then by then you'll have earned your week 9 spring break, or as we call it at UWM, spring recess. In week 10, Um, we're going to be on interaction design, in practice design tools. We'll cover that in chapter 12. Here's where we're going to do the high fidelity prototype. That's going to be due that week. Week 11. Interaction designed for specific types of users. Okay. And that's not going to be associated with a particular chapter of the text, but with our article reading. So we've got 2 articles on that. Week 12, interaction designed for people with disabilities. Again, we don't have a particular chapter on that, but we've got 3 papers to read. Then we're going to get into evaluation. Okay, so what we want to be able to do is to evaluate a user interface. And we're going to cover chapter 13 from the textbook. And we've got 2 articles to read. Now, there are, in this course, there are both graduate students and undergraduate students, and the requirements are different. And the primary difference is that there's an issue paper the graduate students are expected to write, and that'll be due in week 13. In week 14, we'll be working on more having to do with evaluation, in this case, usability studies. And we'll be covering chapter 14 in the text and 2 articles. And in week 15, we're going to have more on evaluation, inspections, analytics, models. So we're going to cover chapter 15 in the text. And our usability testing is going to be due. And then we're going to come to our final real working week. You're going to have project presentations. And at this point, I'm expecting these to be recorded. All right. In the same sense, I'm recording the lecture here. I'm expecting to make a presentation on your project. If we were to do a typical class that I would do, I would have everybody have the opportunity to see other people's presentations. And I'm kind of interested to know if that's the thing that you guys would like to do. And so that's going to be a thing that I'm going to talk about early on in these weekly online office hours sessions. So come and bring your ideas about whether you think that making project presentations available to people inside the course would be a thing that we think is a good idea. I'm going to see them either way, right? So either way, I'm going to see them all. The question is whether you're going to have the opportunity to see them. In addition to your final project presentation being due, there'll be a report. Okay, that's in week 16. All right, so I'll be taking all this and translating it into a proper weekly schedule that's only expressed in one spot. And anytime it changes, or there's something added to it, I will be making an announcement in news on D2L and sending a copy of that in email. Now let's look down at the course elements. Readings, pretty basic expectations. I expect you to do the readings before we're going to discuss them, right? I recommend that you do the reading of a chapter, for instance, before you listen to the recording of the lecture. I think that's the best way to learn. Okay? Practice assignments. Okay, so we're going to have a number of assignments that are due throughout the course. Okay. And essentially, what these are going to be is they are going to be practices for things that we need to put together for our project. So, um, uh, listed here, uh, the identification of good and bad interface. Well, we need to be able to do that to do our project well. Web accessibility assessment. Need to be able to do that to be able to do our project well. A high fidelity prototype. Usability testing. Let's go down to the next one. Okay, so think of these hand-ins as we go along as being, in a way, a parallel of the same skills you're going to have to master to do your final project, in that the hand-ins along the way are practice, and the final project is a final project. It's the big delivery. Here we have in item 3 here the issue paper for graduate students only. It says it's due in week 13. Again, I always have a problem with these things that are in more than one place. Yep, I changed that the right way. I had to change all the weeks because the sample schedule did not include a spring break week, so that made everything go a week later. So when you have these things expressed in sometimes 3 different places, you can sometimes get some problems. Okay, issue paper. Each graduate student will write a research paper regarding a specific issue of human-computer interaction, such as how to design to people with disabilities, the pros and cons of different prototyping approaches. The emphasis is on the identification of challenges of the issue and how to solve the challenges, 1,500 to 2,000 words. In addition, you need to cite a minimum of 10 sources. This is pretty basically the kind of paper that we expect in quite a few of the graduate LIS courses. Final project. Let's talk about that. Okay. Now, I just want to say that there will be detailed instructions on the paper and a grading rubric, which I will be publishing separately. The final project. Everybody's doing it. Each student will plan and execute a full lifecycle project, including identification and analysis of users and requirements, preliminary design, low fidelity and high fidelity prototypes, testing, presenting the complete project to the class. Projects will be proposed by students and will represent either real or simulated workplace scenarios. So if you have a real project, well, you can just get started on it. If you don't, then it's going to be okay to simulate one. And we do have a proposal phase, so we can talk through the appropriateness of your idea at that point. Project submissions will consist of a project proposal and a project report. Overall project requirements, instructions for individual deliverables, grading rubrics will be provided separately. Okay, so that's the general idea of what we're doing. I just want to remind you here that the project ends in a high fidelity prototype. It doesn't end in an implemented system. Okay, this is design. We're designing the interaction. Our high fidelity prototype can easily be interactive. Okay, but it is a prototype nonetheless. Class participation. Okay, so I kind of talked through the elements of class participation earlier, but they're kind of summarized here. There's your introduce yourself post. Okay, There are 3 posts that you're expected to do to the article's discussion forum. You can certainly do more. Um, what I want is people to post uh, 3 times, okay, on the articles. I want us all to read the posts and to respond, okay, and we don't have to respond like parrots or read. Do you have to respond to each one? No, you're not going to be motivated to respond to each one. But what I'll do is I'll count up the responses, and they'll get some credit, and they'll get less credit than the posts themselves. But I'll just what I do is I try to come up with some kind of heuristic accounting for who's contributing what in terms of the posts themselves and in terms of reactions to them. Um, and then we're going to have these online office hours. Okay? Online office hours are optional. They're going to be every Monday evening from 6:30 to 7:30 on GoToMeeting. Okay? There's a link here for this as well. And I hope to see you there. Now down here, evaluation. So the grading formula will be different for undergraduates than for graduates. The difference being that graduate students have an issue paper. Okay? So the practice assignments and the final project will have a slightly different weight for undergraduates than they have for graduates because undergraduates do not have an issue paper. Class participation is high. It's 20%. So please participate. Okay? I think the fact that we've made it so high gives you some indication about how important we think it is for a good learning experience. And we have a translation table here between number grades and letter grades. That's pretty standard. And last but certainly not least is a list of UWM and SOAS academic policies. And these are, on one hand, kind of ordinary because they're boilerplate. These are the things that show up on every syllabus, or at least they should, that we have in the department. And so you may have read them before, okay? Make sure you check through to see if anything has changed. So on one hand, they're boilerplate, they're kind of ordinary. On the other hand, these considerations are like uber important, okay? It's policies that are in the student handbook. It's how we deal with students with disabilities. It's how we deal with students who need to make religious observances, students who are called to active military duty. It's also things just like things like the respect that we have for each other in the educational workplace, right? So there's a list here. How do we deal with incompletes? In some places, you can't. In some schools, it's pretty easy to get an incomplete. At UWM, it's a pretty restrictive policy. So if you think you might need an incomplete, make sure that you understand this policy and talk to me. Discriminatory conduct such as sexual harassment, again, this really has to do with how we're going to treat each other in our workplace and study place. And we have high expectations, so make sure that you understand them. Academic misconduct, same deal. Complaints, grade appeals procedures, and I think that's about it. So again, these things are common. You may have already seen them. You may understand them all well, but they're all really important stuff. And I just want to say, if there's some aspect of this important stuff that you need some help either understanding or you just need some help, I'm here, and so are my colleagues in the department, and we'll do whatever it takes to get you the help that you need. So that's it. That's the course. If I were to give you a couple highlights of stuff that we've talked about already, some kind of thoughts to take away, the thought that I'd like to take away from this course is that it's not just tips and tricks, right? Yeah, we'll talk about tips and tricks, but our point of view is going to be that, well, a couple of things. One is, in order to evaluate a user interface, you really have to understand the job the person is trying to do very well. Okay? So, user interfaces are not good and bad in their own right. They're good and bad in terms of a particular audience who's trying to use a product to get a particular job done. Right? I think the second thing that is going to be our point of view is going to be that we're not just going to make decisions on an anecdotal evidence. Okay, we're going to consider ourselves to be scientists here. So we are going to, in a way, we're going to do studies that are like experiments, and we're going to collect data and we're going to analyze it, and we're going to come to evidence-based conclusions which we're expecting that are going to inform our design such that in the end it's better than it would have been without this activity. So those things are they relate to tips and tricks. They certainly do, but they're kind of interaction design and usability beyond tips and tricks. And that's what we're all about. Okay? So I'm really glad that you're all here. I'm looking forward to meet you personally. Please, when you can, come by online office hours. And I'd like to hear your voice. And I'm just going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.